Why do UFC champions all fall the same way? For years, dominant champions can look permanent. They defend the belt over and over, solve every challenger put in front of them, and begin to feel almost beyond the sport itself. At some point, dominance starts looking less like a streak and more like a law, but eventually they fall. And what is strange is how often those downfalls follow familiar patterns. Not because every champion loses in the same exact fashion, but because the forces that lead to decline tend to look remarkably similar. So let's take a look into how this phenomenon happens, and let's dive into the juicy part. Firstly, we have the danger inside dominance. The qualities that build a championship reign can slowly become the very things that threaten it. Confidence can drift into overconfidence, which in such a dangerous sport can bite you back. Discipline can harden into rigidity. A reliable system can become predictable. Success often creates habits, but over time can create blind spots and make individuals get complacent. The fall usually does not begin with one bad night. It begins much earlier when growth starts slowing while dominance still hides the warning signs. Even long reigning champions like Tyron Woodley showed how success can sometimes lead to caution, replacing evolution. What once looked like patience and control can slowly become hesitation, and hesitation at the highest level can be as dangerous as recklessness. That is the danger inside dominance. It is not always dramatic at first, sometimes it looks like confidence becoming a little too comfortable. Sometimes it looks like a champion relying on what worked yesterday instead of preparing for what comes tomorrow. But in almost every case, the warning signs appear long before the belt is lost. But before, let's talk about the opposite trait that also made some champions lose their reign: confidence becoming excess. Anderson Silva is one of the clearest examples. His greatness came from extraordinary composure, timing, and freedom in chaos. He made elite fighters look helpless. But over time, that same confidence moved closer to risk. What once looked like controlled brilliance began carrying unnecessary danger. Against Chris Weidman, it was not simply one mistake. It was years of dominance creating a belief that he could always live on the edge without consequence. The trait that made him legendary had begun turning against him. Predictability inside success is also a tough one for condecorated champs. Long title reigns often create another problem. What works repeatedly becomes trusted almost automatically. A champion can become so effective within one system that evolution starts slowing down. Kamaru Usman showed how this can happen. His pressure, wrestling, and control made him feel unsolvable, but as challengers adapted, the system that once overwhelmed everyone became easier to study. Leon Edwards did not just land one head kick. He exposed what can happen when a dominant system stops evolving as quickly as the division around it. This moment became one of the biggest what ifs in MMA history, but it also exposed how you should never get complacent mid fight. This links to pressure changing decision making. Champions do not just defend belts, they defend identity. And that creates a pressure most people never see. Jose Aldo carried years of dominance into the Conor McGregor fight, but in one emotional moment, he abandoned the discipline that made him great. That is another pattern. Sometimes champions do not lose because they have declined physically, they lose because pressure changes how they make decisions. They force moments, react emotionally, or fight outside their normal rhythm. The pressure of maintaining greatness can quietly interfere with greatness itself. The belt changing the fighter. Becoming champion can also change the mindset that created the rise. There is a difference between chasing a title and protecting one. Those are not the same mentality. Some fighters thrive in pursuit, but struggle once they carry the burden of being the one everyone studies and hunts. The hunger can soften, urgency can fade. Small changes in mentality can become major changes in performance. This is why some champions begin declining before anyone realizes it. The trap of rigid systems. Dominant champions often rely on systems built through years of repetition and success. But a system can become a prison if it stops adapting. Ronda Rousey showed this in a dramatic way. Her style was devastating because few could deal with it early. But once opponents adapted, the same system that once looked unstoppable started revealing limits. Holly Holm showed that inside one round. Sometimes dominance hides vulnerabilities because no one has yet forced them into the open. Once exposed, the fall can feel sudden even if it had been building for years. Are blind spots created by success? Success can reduce urgency. That may be one of the most overlooked reasons champions decline. When a fighter keeps winning, there is less pressure to reinvent. Improvement can become maintenance, but contenders do not stand still. They study, evolve, and build specifically to solve the champion. Over time, the gap narrows, and often the champion notices too late. Let's be honest, who thought Merab would get beat up by Peter Yan in their last fight? Not a lot of people. This happens not because they stopped working hard, but because success can make adaptation feel less necessary until it suddenly becomes urgent. The illusion of permanence, dominance often creates the illusion that a champion is operating above normal limits. Fans begin believing the reign could continue indefinitely, but long reigns are usually far more fragile than they appear. Beneath the victories, pressures are accumulating. Jose Aldo may be one of the best examples of this. For nearly a decade, he felt less like a champion and more like a constant. His reign was so long and so dominant that people stopped treating it like something that could end. It felt permanent. Every challenger looked like another name to be added to the list, and that is exactly how the illusion forms. Dominance lasts so long that people begin mistaking it for inevitability. But even while Aldo kept winning, the division was changing. New styles were emerging, new challengers were studying him specifically. The pressure of maintaining a legacy was growing. The reign looked untouchable from the outside, but underneath, all the same forces that threaten every champion were still there. Then, in 13 seconds against Conor McGregor, the illusion shattered. Not because Aldo was suddenly no longer great, but because permanence had never really existed. Why challenges eventually break through. Challenges are often underestimated because they enter against a dominant champion's aura. But over time, they do not just chase the belt, they study the cracks, they look for patterns, they prepare specifically for habits built over years. And once enough small vulnerabilities line up, one challenger finally exposes what others had only threatened. The upset often looks sudden. In reality, it is usually the final stage of a longer process. Why even great dynasties end? This is what makes sustained dominance so rare. Becoming champion is difficult, but staying champion may be harder. Not only because challenges improve, but because dominance itself creates problems that must constantly be managed. That's why every long reign carries the seeds of its own danger. The few champions who extend greatness for years are often the ones who keep evolving before those dangers fully catch them. Take a look at John Jones. Even though he has had some later controversies regarding not taking the fight with Tom Aspinall, he managed to stay at the top of his game for a decade. He kept evolving after all those years at the top and was never complacent, which translated to him beating every top contender the light heavyweight division had to offer. Even after having plenty of footage to be studied on him, nobody has ever been able to beat him. This is linked to the pattern behind almost every fall. When people say champions all fall the same way, it does not mean every reign ends within the same situation or the same kind of loss. It means many reigns collapse through the same underlying forces. Success creates blind spots, stability becomes rigidity, confidence becomes excess, pressure alters decisions. The very strengths that built the throne can slowly create cracks in it, which leads us to the end of why this matters. Understanding why champions fall this way changes how dominance is viewed. It shows that decline is often not about one bad night or sudden collapse. It is about hidden pressures developing inside success itself. That is why so many legendary reigns seem to end in familiar patterns. Not because greatness fails suddenly, but because greatness that stops adapting eventually turns fragile. And in the UFC, almost every champion, no matter how dominant they once looked, eventually has to face that truth. This was all for today's video. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. It will help a lot. Peace.